My special pleasure and honor to welcome you all to this very special event here of the Bruno Kreisky Forum for International Dialogue. It's also a real honor to welcome the special guests of tonight, those who will receive the Ari Rath Prize for critical journalism, Maria Sterkl, then Hillel Schenker and Ziad Zayyad for the Palestine-Israel Journal. I'm also very, very grateful to Wien Energie and special welcome to the director of the Vienna energy provider, Diplom Ingenieur Sterkl, that he again sponsored this prize. I will talk about the prize later on. We also have a very interesting group of special laudators tonight. I welcome Tessa Szyszkowitz and the host, Gertraud Borea. They will provide you more information on the reasons why the group of experts have chosen this top-level group from the field of journalism. When Ari Rath died in 2017, Gertraud Auer decided immediately that there must be a very special instrument to remember this great journalist, Ari Rath, who also was an outstanding personality. And it was she who found and established this prize, this Ari Rath Prize for critical journalism. Since 2018, the group of experts was able, I think, to choose a number of outstanding journalists, both from the international arena and from Austria, to receive this prize. I will just, before I turn over to the following ceremony, briefly sum up the biography of Ari Rath. As you all might know, Ari Rath was born in Vienna in 1925, typical for a Viennese Jew. His family came from Galicia, from the former Austrian monarchy, and in 1938, Ari was at that time, Arnold Rath was confronted with the terror of National Socialism in Vienna, both from the Germans and the Austrians. As you might know, he has written an outstanding autobiography with the title Ari Means Lion, where he described his childhood in Vienna, also his efforts to overcome the pre-1938 anti-Semitism when he was part of a school where the authoritarian Schuschnigg regime organized mostly kids with a Jewish background. That means anti-Semitism in Vienna is not something which was invented by the National Socialist regime, but has deep roots in Austrian history and society. He was able to escape to Palestine in 1938 with a children's transport, and in his autobiography, which I really highly recommend, he described his early life in the kibbutz Hamadiyah in the Beit Shean Valley, and he also was very critical when he described the early years in Palestine, also the Zionist youth movement, and also he wrote a lot about the Haganah. We all know him as an excellent editor of the Jerusalem Post, and he also became chief editor. He started there in 1958, and from 1975 on, he was the newspaper's editor-in-chief and publisher. We remember him as not only a very experienced and also well internationally rooted a journalist and editor-in-chief, but also he was a great personality and was able also to assist to his staff at the Post. What I think is also important that he was well connected and politically affiliated with many leaders in what later became Israel, very closely also related to the Labour Party. I just mentioned David Ben-Gurion, Moshe Sharet, Shimon Peres, and Yitzhak Rabin among his closest friends. Also the legendary Jerusalem mayor, Teddy Kollek, who also had Austrian roots. What I find also interesting and important when we close the chapter of Ari Rath's biography, that despite he was kicked out of Austria with brutal force in 1938, he came back in Austria in 2007, was very active, writing not only his memoirs, but also was trying to work intensively in Austrian schools, talking about his experiences until 1938 in Vienna, but also about his experiences and his perceptions of Palestine and Israeli history. And throughout his later career in Israel, he was also involved with peace movements and strongly believed in the right of Palestinians to have a state of their own. When he died in Vienna 2017, he, I think, left a real deep gap in our history and in our memory. And I'm very grateful to you, Gertraud, that you have established this prize here. And my congratulations to all who will receive the prize tonight. And we look now forward to the speeches on the outstanding journalists who you will hear about in a minute. Thank you.
Hello and good evening, and hello, Ari. We miss you here. It should really not be me standing here tonight to hold the Laudator for Maria Sterkl. It should be Alexandra Föderl-Schmidt, who was quite influential also in the decision of Maria to go to Israel as a correspondent, since Alexandra Föderl-Schmidt herself was a correspondent in Israel and also the editor-in-chief of the Standard when Maria was working there. Unfortunately, Alexandra cannot be here tonight, so I'm honored to take her place. For many of you here in Vienna, you know Maria Sterkl for years already, her writing in the Standard, but for the past 4 years, she has been writing her dispatches as a correspondent from Jerusalem. She writes for the Standard, but also for the Frankfurter Rundschau, for the Funke-Gruppe, and so her articles appear all over Germany, also in Westdeutsche Allgemeine Zeitung, and also lesser-known publications like the Iserlohner Kreisanzeiger or the Ostthüringer Zeitung. Don't smile. I'm saying this for a reason, because we who have reported about the Middle East have always the problem that we have to think about for who are we writing, who do we want to reach? And we know, and all of us here, I think, know that the Middle East is a special minefield. Words and even facts mean very different things for people standing in the different camps in the conflict. Not only for Jews and Arabs, or not for left and right, it has become, especially since the Hamas atrocities of October 7th and the beginning of the war against Gaza, a particularly difficult subject to write about. It has upset basically everyone to say anything about Hamatzaf, how the Israelis call the situation. And so here she comes. Maria Sterkl, she grew up near Krems in Niederösterreich, a quiet städtchen, one might say, where she spent more time, as she said once, in vineyards than in school, which in my understanding is very understandable. She then studied Handelswissenschaften, commercial sciences, in Vienna, and she wrote her thesis for her magistra in Bologna about Italian health politics. The problem she diagnosed already then, 25 years ago, the differences between urban and region, the north and the south, long waiting hours, all these problems we experience today in Austria too, 25 years later. This is how Maria Sterkl then started as a journalist, with a keen interest in social topics. First, she worked for die Niederösterreichische Nachrichten, famous Nön, for the Salzburger Nachrichten, and then for the Standard. Her articles also appeared in die Zeit. Sterkl always handled difficult topics. She went to look for the poverty in the middle of our society, here in Austria, as well as she looked at the hostile bureaucracy which keeps migrants from reaching their potential in professional terms when they come to this country. But while she made her career in Vienna, she felt a keen interest in the Middle East, growing slowly over private visits first, volunteering in a kibbutz. In 2019, then, she was ready to leave the Viennese bubble, hoping to become a correspondent. This is where Alexandra Föderl-Schmidt came in and I think advised her to take the jump, and also helped her a little bit when she came to Israel to set up her shop. But then, of course, Maria chose the worst time to arrive in Jerusalem because, as you know, Israelis and Palestinians know what worst time means, but it was really the worst time in terms of being a journalist arriving in Israel because she came in March 2020. So the last day of her quarantine was the first day of the first lockdown of the pandemic. So while the pandemic hit Israel, when you are supposed as a new correspondent to make all the contacts, go to press conferences, meet people, establish everything, she was sitting at home trying to reach people on Zoom, which is really not an easy thing to start your time in a country that is also so divided as Israel and Palestine are. When the pandemic was finally over, October 7th happened. You know, there was a little bit of time in between, I grant you that, but it was basically, she fell from one disaster into the next. So as a journalist, Maria had to deal with all of these events at once. And what she told me last week was that the war, of course, polarizes people even faster. You know, you have to usually align with your camp when a war starts. We have seen this in the last 7 bitter months, also in our reporting, in the debates that happened also here in Austria, that if you don't take a side, everyone's upset. If you try to do your job as a journalist, to be impartial and to see both sides and to keep a perspective and your mind open to the suffering of both sides, you get immediately into trouble. And as Maria says herself, as a journalist, you do well not to take the perspective of one side, but to try to see both. And this is why we are here today. Maria has impressed many in the last years already, but particularly in the last month, since the awful atrocities Hamas committed on October 7th against the Israelis, and since the devastating war against Gaza started in response. I heard her speak this spring in an interview on Austrian radio, and I was very impressed about the simple and clear way how you, Maria, explained the complex and sensitive issues around this deadly Middle Eastern conflict. And so, in the last month, you went to visit Palestinian Bedouins in Majarat outside of Jericho, where they are frequently harassed and threatened by Israeli settlers. You also wrote about the settlers who had to leave Gaza in 2005, and they now plan to return. In all your feature stories, you can feel you need to report also the human side of the story, not only the political side. And for me, there's also a sense, a strong sense, and a need for justice that speaks to me when I read your articles. And there's also a touch of moral indignation, to be fair. And when you write, for example, the incitement always hits the weakest. That's what you wrote when you visited the Palestinians in Majarat. And that, of course, is very much true when you think that, you know, there are civilians in this Bedouin village that cannot defend themselves anymore from Israeli settlers coming to harass them, because by now the police and the army, which are supposed to help protect the civilians on each side of the conflict, are often siding with the settlers nowadays. So do these stories make you popular with everyone? All the effort you go through? Of course not. One aspect of the life of a Middle East correspondent is the online abuse. You say that the hostilities against you are not overwhelming. I find this is a very brave statement, because the social media shitstorms, especially against women, can get so terribly painful and so hard to control. So sometimes one abusive retweet of one of your stories, of course, can turn into a snowball effect, and sort of people repost things without even reading them, which is one of the big problems in journalism today, and especially one for a freelance correspondent like Maria, although she's very closely linked to the Standard and her editorial office there, and also to the Frankfurter Rundschau. The problem is often that if you don't have a powerful media house, a publisher behind you that can defend you also with legal means, you have to often sort of pick your battles and think, should I go after a person abusing you online or not? Because it costs a lot of time and effort, especially if you have to make a living of your work. So I always think that freelance journalists should get more protection from every side, from governments, but also from their publishing and media houses, and also from our journalist associations, all the international ones too. One other issue that concerns Maria now, like all of us, is that since the Gaza war started, journalists have been banned from reporting from Gaza. So if you're a Jerusalem correspondent, at my time, we would go regularly to Gaza, even if Gaza was already then restricted. But it was clear that foreign correspondents had access. So the Foreign Press Association, in the past 7 months, has tried to put in several petitions in the High Court, in the Supreme Court in Israel, to push for allowing free access to Gaza to describe what is actually happening, because otherwise we do what you all do. We can sort of try to watch television, and that's sort of not always the most impartial way of finding out what the story really is. So Maria, who is hoping to return to Gaza soon, of course also hopes even more that she can do what she likes to do best. She told me that it's not only the commentary and the editorials that she writes for her papers to explain the very complicated situation, but what she likes to do is writing feature stories in order to bring out the human side of every story that she goes to find in the field. And at the moment, this is even more complicated than before in the West Bank, of course, not because there's no access for us, but because it's just everything has become more complicated in reaching out to people on all sides. And in Israel, of course, there are a lot of stories that are also close to the heart of Maria Sterkl as a reporter, I think. You have a very similar way how people live in Israel and in Palestine when it comes to social issues. A lot of people have been struggling throughout the pandemic with mental health issues, with sort of access to their relatives, but also the cost of living crisis, for example, very sort of normal things that happen in Israel as they happen in Austria. And that's something I think that is close to Maria Sterkl's heart as a reporter, to make clear that we are not talking about a different planet when we talk about the Middle East. We're talking just about a society that has often very similar problems than we do here in Austria. So this ability of thinking of stories in a comparative perspective she shares with the man whom this prize is named after. Ari always looked at every story from various perspectives. One was newsworthiness. He was a news addict, as we know. And secondly, he was always very, very interested in journalistic impartiality. But he also loved the social context stories happened in. To my children, he was like a third grandfather. We met sort of in the beginning of the 90s, and he sort of had a very, very, very dear part in our hearts in the wider clan. What Ari did was he always kept his mind open. I think in times like this is a particularly helpful thing for journalists and also for our audiences. And it helps especially when you sit between the chairs, as Ari, as an Israeli journalist with an Austrian background, always did. So I have very strong hopes that Maria Sterkl's leg muscles are strong enough to sit between the chairs too. We can certainly see in your reporting, Maria, that your brain and your heart are wired strongly enough to be able to live up to Ari's legacy. Thank you very much.
Good evening. As a journalist, I chose a path deliberately that doesn't involve a lot of showing my face to the camera and to the world, because I prefer to write stories about other people, about politicians, and you could say also to hide behind them. It's very comfortable sometimes. So I'm in an unusual situation today to talk in front of an audience about myself. But I'm very happy to receive this recognition, this important award, because I have to say that writing about the situation in Israel-Palestine is something that makes a lot of people angry and very few people happy. Most of all because in these days there are not a lot of happy stories to tell from this region. I know that when you receive an award for your work in journalism, some expect you to say very clever things about the market situation, the crisis journalism is facing today. I'm afraid I'm the wrong person to ask how to solve these problems. I'm a graduate from an economic university, but I have no idea how to solve the market pressures in journalism. I just don't know. What I know is that what is just as threatening for free journalism is the political pressures that we are facing. The forces, the radical right forces that are on the rise in many parts of the world, also in Israel, and also in Austria, where general elections will be held this fall. These forces aim to fight independent journalism, not only because it's threatening to them, not only because it's criticizing them, and not only because it's unveiling their corruption, but also because journalism for them is something that is part of the elite that they are fighting against, especially journalism that is bound to humanistic principles. Even when they have already grasped power and rule almost without restrictions, they will still claim that they are victims of this elite and fight against it. It's this mechanism of self-victimization that I believe has caused a lot of bloodshed in the past, and is also one of the greatest inhibitors of a political solution in Israel and Palestine. I'm saying all this also because I believe that it's exactly this energy from which the massive incitement campaign against Alexandra Föderl-Schmidt, who cannot be here today, comes from. Alexandra has always been a person who did not let power corrupt her beliefs. This is why the haters picked her, but they could have picked others as well, other women especially, because it's simply much less risky for them to attack a powerful woman than to attack a powerful man, because they have learned that if you say bad things about a powerful man, there will quickly be other men who come in solidarity with them. But these men often remain remarkably silent when it comes to a woman. I would like to take this opportunity to say thank you to Alexandra for being a role model for me, but also for many others, I believe, in setting boundaries against corruption when many times she could have taken the easy way out. And for all the energy she put into empowering others, encouraging others to follow her path. In the past 7 months, doing this work has often been challenging for me. Listening to the stories of survivors of the massacres of the 7th of October, talking to families of hostages that are still in Gaza, having conversations with civilians in Gaza and hearing the testimonies of humanitarian aid workers who try to do the impossible in this humanitarian catastrophe. Many of these stories will haunt me. So this prize, this award gives me strength to go on. Before I stop, let me say thank you to my fellow journalists in Gaza. I'm not a war reporter, but they are. I can go back to my safe place in Jerusalem at the end of the day, but they don't have safety where they can go to. They have no safety whatsoever, not in their work and not in their home. And each one of them has lost a family member in this war. Since we, the journalists who are based in Israel, are banned from entering Gaza to report from there, we rely on them. And we should honor them for it. Now, one very last thing. I know there were others before me who donated the prize money to organizations who do very important work. I want to be transparent and declare that I'm not intending to do this. There are journalists who have an employment contract. There are journalists like me and many others who are freelancers, and live with the constant risk of losing their income, and while at the same time lacking any kind of basic social benefit. So I take this prize as an encouragement to go on, also under these circumstances, and I promise to use the money not for baby diapers, but for for working on some stories, and hopefully this will be useful to us all. Thank you all for coming today, and I wish you a good evening.
Definitely, the Ari Rath Prize is bringing luck, because last year, Noah Landau from Haaretz, she also expected a baby. So it's the second Ari Rath Prize baby that we are having in the room. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, dear friends, dear Maria, Hillel, Ziad, I'm very honored to speak to you. But I would like, before I go into the theme of the Palestine-Israel Journal, I would like to welcome a very, very dear person who is one of the kindest people in this universe, and the most faithful friend to Ari since decades. He was always there when Ari was well and when he was unwell. He was there when Ari died, and he was with me when we buried him. Please welcome with me Salah Turishman from a big Jerusalem family who is with us tonight. Salah comes every year from Washington, D.C. to be at the ceremony in honor of Ari. And of course, I would also send my warm greetings to Alexandra Federer-Schmidt. I had a telephone conversation with her last week, and her doctors recommended not to travel yet, but she sends her warm regards to all of you. So I have the honor to speak about the international Ari Rath awardees, Ziad Abu Zayyad and Hillel Schenker, the editors of the Palestine-Israel Journal. I know about Hillel, I read Hillel, but we never met in person. I know Ziad. I met Ziad many times, and for the first time thanks to Ari. I don't know if you remember Ziad, it was in 1994 in Bregenz, around the Bregenzer Festspiele, where I organized a talk with you and Ari. It was the year where Nabucco was on the program. And we organized a talk with you and Ari. And we were all under the impression of the Oslo agreements, which had been signed a couple of months before. And we thought that a breeze of new era was just about to blow. Ziad and his comrade, Victor Ziegelman, had just started the Palestine-Israel Journal to accompany the developments with intellectual and human contributions. Ari, like many others, joined you with his contributions, with his writing, but also on the board, as far as I know. Hillel was then an editor of the New Outlook, an Israel Peace Monthly, founded in the spirit of Martin Buber's philosophy of dialogue, and he has written for many international newspapers and Israeli Hebrew language press. Hillel Schenker is a co-founder of the Peace Now movement, served for many years as spokesperson for the Israeli branch of the International Physicians for the Prevention of Nuclear War, and is, among others, an international advisor, board member of the Global Majority Center for Nonviolent Conflict Resolution. Ziad Abu Zayyad is a former member of the Palestinian Legislative Council, a former Minister of State in the Palestinian Authority, and former Deputy Chairman of the Political Committee of the Euromed Parliament. He was also the head of the Palestinian delegation to the Middle East multilateral peace talks in the Arms Control and Regional Security Working Group from 1994 to 1996. Ziad Abu Zayyad was an advisor to the Palestinian negotiation team in Washington, D.C. in 1992, and later a member of the post-Oslo negotiation team that concluded the 1994 Israeli-Palestinian agreement, the so-called Cairo Agreement, that led to the establishment of the Palestinian Authority. Ziad has been imprisoned several times by the Israeli authorities. The last time was an administrative detention for 6 months. Immediately after his release, he joined the Palestinian team led by Faisal Husseini, the Grand Seigneur of Jerusalem, whom I was also honored to meet at the Orient House when the Orient House still belonged to the Palestinians. And he joined Faisal to negotiate with the US Secretary of State James Baker the arrangements for the Madrid Conference of 1991. In 1986, already in 1996, well before the Oslo Accords, Ziad Abu Zayyad founded the Palestinian bi-monthly Hebrew language journal, Gesher, The Bridge, of which he was publisher and editor. He is interviewed frequently by Israeli and international media on current issue of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. The Palestine-Israel Journal is published by Middle East Publications, a non-profit organization founded, as I said, in 1994 by two prominent Palestinian and Israeli journalists, Ziad Abu Zayyad and Victor Ziegelman, and was established currently with the first phases of the Oslo peace process to encourage dialogue between civil societies on both sides and broaden the base of support for the peace process. It was obvious from the start that along with the institutional efforts of Palestinians and Israelis, channels of communication must be opened for academics and other intellectuals, opinion and policymakers, grassroots organizations, activists to voice their views and take part in the public debate for democratic and just solution to the conflict. This is something that we miss totally today, as Maria said. Palestine-Israel Journal is the only independent joint publication to be produced locally and in which the crucial issues at stake are presented from perspectives of both sides. As such, they have an important responsibility and role to play in maintaining open channels for dialogue. And I'm sure in the following conversation with Tessa, you will tell us how you tackle in this very difficult moment now in these dire times to keep channels open, to talk to each other. A particular joy for me is to see that the next generation is taking their place at Palestine-Israel Journal. Nisreen Abu Zayyad, Ziad's daughter, who was one of our participants in the Middle East Youth Peace Forum that Margit Schmidt and myself organized in the 1990s with young Israelis, Palestinians, Egyptians, Jordanians, and Austrians. She has joined the PIJ as managing editor together with her colleague, Susie Becher. So the struggle goes on, the dialogue goes on, the Palestine-Israel Journal goes on. In the name of the jury, I congratulate you to the Ari Rath Prize 2024. Thank you very much. So you stay here, Tessa comes up, and you do the conversation, okay? Yes?
What do we do with this? Yes.
You do the conversation now.
Okay.
Are you
I
okay?
don't know.
Yeah?
How do you want to?
You wanted to say something?
Well, I don't know. I prepared a few
Yeah, so
comments.
do it,
so
and then
if
we do the conversation.
Yeah. Okay, so anyway, I, in thinking of this very moving ceremony, I prepared just a few introductory comments about the situation. First thing I wanted to say is that essentially today both the Israeli and Palestinian societies are two highly traumatized societies by the current situation. Each one is feeling the immensity of their own pain and have tremendous difficulty in having empathy for the other side. First, we had the October 7th horrific Hamas attack, and then we had the disproportionate Israeli military response, which has created such a humanitarian disaster. And war crimes have been committed by both sides. It's quite clear. The Israelis are thinking about the Holocaust, and the Palestinians are thinking about the Nakba, and each one is immersed in their own trauma. And yet, when you have a crisis like this, crises also create opportunities. We simply cannot continue the way we were before. We had 5 Israeli elections in which the Israeli-Palestinian conflict wasn't on the agenda. Now it has returned to the agenda, and it will be definitely on the agenda of the next elections. And at the Palestine-Israel Journal, we obviously had a certain amount of tension in the beginning, but we were able to write an editorial whose title is "Amidst the Horror Lies an Opportunity for Peace." And then we followed that in November by a joint Israeli-Palestinian call for peace. In terms of how are we functioning, I'm very proud that my colleague Ziad suggested that we open a WhatsApp group for the entire editorial board of 15 Israelis and 15 Palestinians. And throughout this crisis, we have an ongoing dialogue between both sides and a forward-looking dialogue. Today is Israeli Memorial Day. And yesterday evening, 2 joint Israeli-Palestinian organizations, Combatants for Peace and the Bereaved Family Forum, held a joint memorial service in memory of all who have been killed on both sides, not only in this crisis, but in all the wars. And tomorrow is Israel's 76th Independence Day, and I long for the day when we will be able to celebrate both Israeli and Palestinian independence. And this is our mission, this is what we are working for. Yeah.
Thank you, Hillel. Thank you all for coming and giving us this opportunity to meet you and talk to you. Thank you for giving us this prize, which is an honor for us, not only because of its value, but also because it gives us the impression that you evaluate what we are doing and you encourage us to continue to do what we are doing. And thank you, Gertraud, for inviting us, hosting us, and giving us this honor. I know that you will ask us questions about politics and political situations, so I will not steal the show from you in advance. I will give you the chance to ask us the questions and try to squeeze us and take out from us whatever you want to take. It depends on you. If you are a good journalist, you can get something interesting. If you ask traditional questions, you will get nothing. I will use this platform to say a few words about Ari. And I will not speak politics. I'll speak about Ari. I was sitting there, and honestly, I could hardly move my eyes from looking on the portrait of Ari. I was looking at him. I tried to move my face to the audience, see the speakers, but all the time, unconsciously, I feel myself attached to him, pulled to look at him. The first time I met Ari was in the late 70s, when I was the editor of Al-Fajr newspaper. It was an Arabic newspaper, the mouthpiece of the PLO. And I went to the Jerusalem Post to see someone working at the Jerusalem Post, and Ari came, and they told him that this is Ziad Abu Zayyad, and he hugged me, and you are welcome, we are happy to host you. And since then, we became friends. At that time, to say the editor of the Jerusalem Post, it was something big, too much. And to see the editor of the Jerusalem Post so friendly and kind to a Palestinian opponent, it's also something special. And since then, we continued our relation. And he became a member of our editorial board. We were together with him in Bergen. We were in many other conferences and many other places. If I try to imagine Ari, I always imagine Ari smiling. It's always, his face, always smiling. And Ari, you may know him, he was big, taller than me, fat, big. And I always, when he sees me, he hugs me. And I feel myself like a baby embraced by big Ari. Honestly, I miss Ari as a human being, as a good friend, and also as a fighter for peace. Because when we had all the discussions in our editorial board, and we usually have a meeting every 6 weeks, where about 15 Israelis and 15 Palestinians meet together, and we start the first hour of our meeting talking about the political situation and the future prospects and what's going on the Palestinian side and on the Israeli side before we go and discuss issues related to the journal. And always Ari was inspiring us with his positive attitude, with his very interesting ideas, and with his input to the discussion, and with his guidance for the journal to find our way within these very conflicting waves happening around us. I think Ari was a loss for me as a friend and for us at the journal, and I believe that Ari will be still remembered for many, many, many years to come. Gertraud, I'm sorry to speak about this personal feeling, but this is Ari, which I will always keep in my memory. And now we'll go to politics.
Okay, so Ziad, I'm not here to pull things out of you. We just thought we should make a little round of having you analyze, you three, the situation, to see also a little bit what you expect now in the next weeks and months to happen. So I would like to ask actually Maria first. We have heard a lot of talk and got already closer also to a deal to exchange the Israeli hostages with a pause in the fighting, and also Palestinian prisoners. this has slipped away a little bit now, the idea that it will happen soon. What do you think is sort of the state of affair? Can we expect a renewal of the negotiations soon, or rather a operation in Rafah in full fling?
Yes. I've been more pessimistic before. You might say it's optimism that is more like wishful thinking, because I think this is should be one of the priorities in this operation, to get the hostages back and to have a ceasefire and to go on from there. The reason why I'm saying I'm less pessimistic is because I see that pressure in Israel is growing, and also among people who know more than me about military strategy. I more and more get the feeling that on the Israeli side, they see that this idea of defeating Hamas and having this as a priority, it's not going to work the way they were thinking it would. And that the clock is ticking and it's time to get an agreement. There's a lot of pressure also, of course, from other states that are allies of Israel or that have become new allies with Israel, and I hope it will work out. I see that there's a majority in the war cabinet for a deal, and I hope it will. We only can hope.
I mean, Hillel, we've seen so strongly the expression of the Israeli public before October 7th against the government of Benjamin Netanyahu, with all the far-right settlers in important positions. So in the past 7 months, of course, this has come to fruition, this horror cabinet inflicting this war on Gaza, when more moderate voices within the Israeli, also political scenes, have called already for a while now to agree to a ceasefire to get also the hostages home. So Ehud Olmert, for example, had now an editorial that was widely read, former Prime Minister of Israel, also of the Likud, but a lot more moderate, almost a peacenik if compared to Netanyahu, his successor. So would you say now that the pressure is really mounting within Israel to push Netanyahu to a ceasefire, but also to push him eventually out of government after soon to be happening elections, and how can we get there?
Yeah. Well, yes, clearly the pressure within Israel is growing. There are weekly public opinion polls that are published, and at this point, the Likud, which has 33 seats in the Knesset, would only get 17 seats. And clearly the public does not want Netanyahu to continue. What we see in general, people believe that Netanyahu wants the war to continue because as long as the war continues, he remains prime minister. And therefore, what's happening now is that there is public pressure growing. The demonstrations which initially just said make rescuing the hostages the priority, these demonstrations are now saying, along with making that the priority, there have to be new elections and Netanyahu has to resign. But that's only one component of the situation. What we also need, and to some degree are beginning to see, is international pressure. Pressure from the Biden administration, pressure from Israel's Arab Sunni allies, like the Egyptians, who now said that they're joining the South Africans at the ICJ. And there is hope, but there is no guarantee. And so it's a mixture of pessimism, optimism. I tend to believe that you frequently accuse me of being too optimistic, but I believe that there is opportunity and hopefully it will be realized. But all of these factors have to make that happen.
Ziad, finally, not finally, last but not least, the Palestinian society, of course, is under enormous pressure at the moment with a war going on against the civilian population in Gaza and at the same time against a leadership, the Hamas leadership, which is not the leadership of everyone, obviously, in the Palestinian camp. I've been recently in the West Bank, in Ramallah, and I was thinking how difficult it is for the old Fatah leadership, which is now ended up to being the Palestinian Authority. But if you think of a renewal process and the future and a possible new government that could also be involved in taking over Gaza and governing Gaza together with other Arab states, involved with financial help, how can this even work? How can you sort of realign the forces to make sense for a majority of the Palestinian population that should be called to finally have elections and freely decide what they actually want as a government?
Well, your question implies as if the problem is on the Palestinian side. And the problem is not on the Palestinian side. We are witnessing a genocide. We are witnessing a children slaughterhouse in Gaza every day. The Israelis have 7th of October. Until now, we have 225 7th of October. They had 1 day of fighting, 1 day of casualties and victims on the Israeli side. We have now 225 days. Every day people are killed. Now the number of the victims is approaching 40,000 people killed in Gaza, and another about 10,000 people are still under the rubble. And we have more than 2 billion people homeless. And Israel is still pushing, destroying and killing every moment. And if someone asks me about the Palestinian politics and the Palestinian leadership and the division between Hamas and Fatah, it's a luxury. It's not the time to talk about the internal Palestinian politics, but to talk about what's happening in Gaza right now. These crimes committed against my people are the most urgent issue which had to stop. And the problem, I did not speak, so please be patient with me. Be patient with me. The problem is not with Netanyahu. The problem is with the Israeli society, because the Israeli society is shifting gradually towards the fanatic, religious right wing. I lived with this occupation from its beginning. The change which is taking place in Israel, in the Israeli government, in the Israeli army, in the Israeli society, is tremendous. Israel was a socialist state, a democratic state. I had relations with many ministers, with prime ministers, with very senior Israeli officers, and I see the change happening within the Israeli society. There was a time when Kahana was ousted from the law, prohibited from being in the Knesset because he was a racist, a fascist. He was dangerous for the Israeli democracy. Now the people who follow Netanyahu, Kahana, they have 10 members of Knesset. And their power in the Israeli society is increasing. If Netanyahu is changed, Hillel spoke about the public poll and public opinion in Israel, and that there is a change, that the Likud are losing. But for whom are the Likud losing? They are losing to Gantz. And Gantz is another version of Netanyahu. The issue of resolving the Palestinian-Israeli conflict is not on the agenda of the Israeli public. Full stop. There are now more than 700,000 settlers in the occupied Palestinian territories. We speak about a Palestinian state alongside the state of Israel in the West Bank and Gaza and East Jerusalem, all this. But where is the Palestinian state going to be established? They did not leave a room for a Palestinian state. Some people speak about settlers' violence against the Palestinians. It's not settlers' violence. It is settlers' terrorism against Palestinians, burning families inside their houses, attacking. You speak about the Crystal Night. The Crystal Night is happening from time to time in Palestinian villages by the fanatic Jewish settlers. This is the issue. I believe that there will be no change from within Israel or from within the Israeli society. The change should come from outside. And Hillel spoke about Biden, and we see Biden, he doesn't have any clear policy. One day he is supporting Israel with weapons, and blah, blah, blah. One day he say, I will withhold bombs. The other day he say, I will give bombs. I don't know what this man wants. He's doing nothing. So to cut the story short, there is no room for being optimistic. The problem is not on the Palestinian side. The Israeli government is holding our taxes. They collect taxes on the Palestinian imports, and according to the agreement, they can have 4% commission. Now they collect billions of dollars, and they're keeping them. They don't give to the Palestinian Authority. Yesterday, there was a statement by the Palestinian Authority finance minister saying that they will pay 50% of the salary to the employees for last month. And during the last 2 years, they were paying half salaries, 60% salaries. And this is weakening the Palestinian Authority. The Israelis are not allowing the Palestinian police to function. I live in Azariah. It's one of the suburbs of East Jerusalem. There was a murder in Azariah 2 months ago. The Israelis did not allow the Palestinian police to come to Azariah to arrest the one who killed him, though there is a video and it's very clear he was shooting him and he killed him. The Israeli strategy and policy is to weaken the Palestinian Authority and to continue a character assassination against the Palestinian Authority to show that it is weak, it is not functioning, it's not democratic, it is corrupted, it's not a partner for peace. This is their strategy. So what is important for us now is, first of all, to have an immediate ceasefire, immediate Israeli withdrawal from the Israeli army from Gaza Strip, allow aid to come to Gaza, food and medicine, and allow the reconstruction of Gaza. You know, hundreds of thousands of houses are demolished. People are living in tents. It's summer, but very short. It will be winter again. Where shall people go? Tens of thousands of people who have lost their legs, their hands, they need medication. They need to be treated. This is the very urgent issue. As long as Israel is operating and fighting and killing people and destroying houses in Gaza, we can't talk politics. Everyone should now insist on an immediate ceasefire. Stop killing. Stop killing civilians. Hamas are very well digged under the ground. They have tunnels, and they are not killing Hamas. You know, they were fighting in north of Gaza, in Jabalia and the Shati and the Zaytun 4 months ago, and they said, we finished with North Gaza, now we go to the south, to Khan Yunis and Deir al-Balah and Rafah. Yesterday, they were fighting again in Jabalia. Which to put an end to Hamas, it is impossible, because they are fighting against an ideology, against the people who insist that they want to be free. They want to live with freedom and dignity. Allow us to live free, and then this will not happen as long as the Israelis are adopting this ideology. They wanted to push 2 million Palestinians from Gaza Strip to Sinai, to Egypt, in order to annex Gaza Strip to Israel and make the larger Israel. And they want to do the same in the West Bank and kick us and send us to Jordan. This will not work. And if Israel continue in this direction, believe it or not, it will be at the end, it will be the end of Israel, because Israel is isolating itself. Israel is using this issue of anti-Semitism, but the people are now opening their eyes. See what is happening at the universities in Europe, in America, and everywhere.
Okay, but let's sort of structure it a little bit so that we don't get everything in one answer.
Okay.
Thank you, first of all, for what you said, because I think it's very important for people also to hear the perspective coming from you and coming with your history also to this conflict, talking about it now, because I think it's important to understand how difficult it is to keep also a clear mind in a conflict like this when a war is raging on without end. I do have to say that because we in Austria and in Germany have committed the last big genocide against the Jews, that we are sort of very sensitive when it comes to the use of genocide as a term. So I personally would not necessarily use that term for this war, but it is clear that it is a terrible, terrible war that goes on and that has sort of gone much too far already. If not from the beginning, you know, you could argue sort of what the right of self-defense implies. Yeah? What I still think in my original question to you, to think about how can the Palestinian society also react in the long run to a political development. You know, I think we all agree here in the hall that the end of occupation of the Palestinian territories that were occupied in 1967 is sort of the basic for talking about peace settlement. So maybe you can still sort of answer a tiny little bit, go in my direction with the question, what the Palestinian society can also say to Hamas or to Fatah, or is there a need for a completely renewal also of the political parties, how to reach out, to reach also the very radicalized young people in the West Bank who will not vote again for the Palestinian Authority as it was till now. So where is the thinking going? Even if we need a ceasefire first for all of this, I think it's important to think about the future of this next generation in a political sense also.
Well, we have internal debate within the Palestinian society. You can find people who are very critical of what Hamas did on the 7th of October. And they've said that Hamas brought a disaster to us and gave Israel the excuse to do what they are doing now. You can hear these voices within the Palestinian side. But again, the question, where was Israel before the 7th of October? Why the Israelis did not allow any political process to start and find a solution to this conflict? Because this conflict did not start on the 7th of October. It started from 1967. And at the 1967, the Israeli government made a statement that they will keep the occupied territories until the Arabs accept to negotiate with Israel and make peace with Israel. In 2002, there was a conference in Beirut, the Arab Summit in Beirut, and they adopted what is called the Arab Peace Initiative, which is originally a Saudi suggestion. And the Arab Peace Initiative says that the Arabs, all the Arab countries, will be ready to recognize Israel, normalize relations with Israel, make peace with Israel, if the Israelis accept to withdraw from the occupied territories and allow the creation of a Palestinian state. And 1 year later, there was the Islamic Conference Organization in Tehran. 54 Islamic countries, including all the Arab countries, and they adopted the same Arab peace plan, peace initiative. And the Israelis did not accept. And at that time, it was Shimon Peres, the prime minister. And they said, well, the Arabs are maneuvering, the Palestinians maneuvering, we don't trust them. The Director General of the Foreign Ministry in Israel, Avi, he was the most close person to Shimon Peres, and he was the man of secret of Shimon Peres. He wrote a book after Shimon Peres passed away, and he said that Shimon Peres had never, ever accepted the idea of allowing the creation of a Palestinian state. So there is no decision, no strategic decision on the Israeli side to allow the creation of a Palestinian state. They want us a kind of self-rule, but minor self-rule with all kinds of conditions. We are unhappy with ourselves. We are unhappy with our leadership. We started a democratic process. I was elected member of parliament in '96. And from '96 to 2006, things were fine and okay. We had a parliament, we were functioning. In 2007, there was the division by Hamas, and afterwards, the parliament did not function. We tried a few times to have elections, but the Israelis did not allow elections in East Jerusalem, though there is an agreement between Israel and the PLO to allow elections in East Jerusalem in a very special formula that the Israelis can say the Palestinians are not having elections in East Jerusalem, and the Palestinians say we are having in East Jerusalem. How that was, the Israelis said, okay, we will allow elections in East Jerusalem. The Palestinians will go and vote in the post office. As what happened also with foreigners in different countries, they go and vote in the post office. And the Palestinians said, okay, we vote in the post office because it is our country, it's our city, Jerusalem. Even this thing, the Israelis did not allow. In 2017, there was supposed to be elections they did not allow. In 2001, there were supposed to be elections they did not allow. They do not want us to have a state, to have the organs of a state, to have a legislative authority, a judicial authority. They are trying to make everything collapse and then something. We, as a Palestinians, we have a criticism against our leadership, against our structure. We want to build a state, and we know that the first step towards building a state is elections, democratic, transparent elections under international monitoring. But now, at this very moment, we need to see an end to this thing, what's happening in Gaza. It is unbelievable that people go to normal life, daily life, and that thing is happening in that part of the world. And you spoke about the Germans. We are paying the price of your crimes. We do not deny the Holocaust.
I think we agree.
We sympathize with them.
In all of this.
Netanyahu, in the beginning, after 7th of October, he said that Hamas are ISIS, which means the Islamic State. And then he found out that the argument of ISIS doesn't work well with the ears of the Europeans. So he started to say about them Nazis. And he started to compare the 7th of October with the Holocaust.
But Ziad, let's stay a little bit also, because Hillel is already motioning at me that he wants to come in here.
Some comments. Yes, okay. First of all, I totally agree that what we need is an immediate ceasefire and an end to the war. We begin with that. And more voices within Israel are saying that Netanyahu's claim that his goal is total victory is totally impossible. It cannot be achieved, and the fact is that it should stop now. That's number one. Number two is the fact that everyone in Israel today knows that it was Netanyahu's policy to increase support for Hamas, to enable Qatar to send $30 million every month. And when Qatar said, we feel maybe we should stop. We don't want to continue. Netanyahu said to them, it's important. Please continue providing funding for Hamas. And the purpose was clearly to strengthen Hamas and weaken the PLO, the PA, Abbas, so that there would be no negotiating partner for the possibility of a resolution of the conflict based on a two-state solution. This is something that is clear to all Israelis. And what you see today all of the time on the internet is ads pop up saying, Netanyahu, you're the head, you're responsible, you have refused to accept responsibility, you have to go. So we begin with that. And the next thing is the fact that yes, it is terrible that we have Ben Gvir, the follower of Kahana, Kach, the racist, messianic, increasing now, according to the polls, to having 10 seats within the Knesset, whereas the Likud predecessors wouldn't even, they would walk out when Kahana spoke. And Netanyahu actually brought them into the government so that he could try to evade having to go to jail. Essentially, this is, everybody knows that as well. So you have a situation where yes, you have the Likud with, let us say, 17 seats according to the polls, and the racists getting another 10. That's only 27 seats. The fact is that it's clear
the religious parties.
No, right now they're not getting into the Knesset. Smotrich may or may not get into the Knesset. He gets 4 seats. So yes, there is a movement to the right among younger people, but there is also an awareness that the fact that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict was not on the agenda in all of the previous elections can no longer work. There are people within, you will all recall that there was a huge mass protest, pro-democracy protest movement for 40 weeks. 250,000 people went out to the streets. And now many of the leaders of that protest movement are saying, before we just wanted to focus on our work, high tech, et cetera, and now we realize that we also have to enter politics, because that's where the decisions will be made about the future of Israel. And they're also saying that we also know that the Israeli-Palestinian conflict has to be on the agenda, and it will be on the agenda of the next elections. And then I will add also one other point. Gantz and Eisenkot are not Netanyahu. They are not saying clearly what is necessary, but the polls indicate that at least 60% of the Israeli public believes that, yes, you have to place the Israeli-Palestinian conflict on the agenda. Yes, we have to negotiate. We have to move towards a resolution of the conflict. So, and the question of no question that too many settlements, 700,000 settlers, but 80% of those settlers live within 4 to 5% of the green line of the international border. And the Palestinian negotiators and also the Arab Peace Initiative has been amended to say that a two-state solution based on the 67 borders with mutually agreed upon land swaps of about 4 to 5%, which would neutralize the problem of the majority of the settlers. The remaining settlers, probably half of them, would return to Israel proper. Some of them would, they're so attached they would be ready to live under a Palestinian authority. And there would be also probably 20 or 30,000 who would resist. And as happens when we look back at what happened with the Egyptian agreement, they would be defeated. The question, of course, is will we have the political will on the international arena in Israel and also the Palestinian partner, a clear partner, to be able to move forward. It is possible, it is not guaranteed.
Thank you. Let me just round it up with a question to Maria before we go and discuss all the outstanding issues that we haven't addressed yet over a glass of sparkling water. Maria, we see how complicated the whole situation is, even more complicated now than ever before. Do you think that there's a role that countries like Austria can play in this? The European Union, Hillel was just saying, the international community needs to help. In the country itself, usually people say, like, forget the Europeans, they can't make up their mind, and it's only dependent on the US. But is there something where the EU could be stronger, supporting, for example, a call for a ceasefire, or support for Palestinian structures, also opposition? What should we do? What should our government here in Austria do?
Recognition of a Palestinian state.
No, Austria did not vote for the membership of the PLO.
But that's what they should do.
No, the vote 2 days ago, Austria did not vote for it.
Okay.
I would say, in principle, be more courageous and opt for a more sustainable solution in the Middle East, and not just take the easy way out and put funds in this direction and in the other direction just to not make anyone angry. And then if there are some revelations that have proven until now unbiased, for example, against the UNRWA, UN Agency for Palestinian Relief Work, to stop the funding because you feel some kind of pressure to act, but without a strategy. I think it should be a European strategy. Austria should engage more on the European level to engage more in a solution, especially if we think about elections in the United States with a possible scenario of Donald Trump winning the elections. I hope for progressive forces in Europe to unite and engage more in the Middle Eastern subject. It has been neglected for too long.
I would say that Bruno Kreisky, Ari Rath, Maria, Hillel, and Ziad, many others who are here tonight, and especially also Gertraud Auer, of course, have always thought about this conflict as something that we have to solve together with maybe difficult political decisions, but not to give up. And I think that's also one of the things that Ari would especially support, to say, like, even if the situation is hopeless, we will bring in some hope and we continue fighting. So I want to thank you three, of course, very much. Congratulations again. And let's all move on, I think.
We have the invitation by Wind Energy to have not only a glass of water, but to eat. So you're most welcome to join next door and enjoy food and drinks. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you. It's important.
And excuse me if I was tough a little bit.
No, you need to be tough. The situation is tough, honestly.